Hello and welcome to 360 Self Love. I am your host, Vimalis Bosque, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about grief and how it can shift our perspective, how it can awaken us to what truly matters, and invite us into a more intentional, aligned way of living. I'm super excited to introduce you to today's guest, my dear friend, Barham Neopishko. Hi, P.
Hi, V. So
Thank
good
you,
to
my
be
love.
with you today.
Thank you, my love. Thank you so much for being here. I love your last name. Have I ever told you that? Pishko.
No. Do you know that my mom kept her given name when she and my dad got married. And so it's a combination of mom and dad. So Evan, my brother and I are the only ones that have a doozy of the whole Neil hyphen Pishka situation going
I
on.
love it. So Neil is also a last name.
That's my mom's last name.
I
And
love
my
it.
dad's last name is Pishko, and I just put them together to make this name that no one could ever pronounce in school on a roll. It was
I
always
love
just
it.
like where they stopped in the roll. I was like, oh, that's
Yeah.
you're at Param. That's me. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Nice. I love it. I love it. I like love pronouncing it. Pishko. Pishko.
Very Slavic.
Okay, so I wanted to have you come have this conversation because you and I have had multiple conversations on our experience with grief, you losing your brother, me losing my mom, and how it changed the course of our lives, and for us, how it took us down a path that oftentimes not everyone who experiences grief goes down that path. I think that grief changes you no matter what, but specifically for us, it really had us looking inward and focusing on our health and our priorities in a different way. And I know you've started your yoga journey after, or was it before or after losing your brother? I don't remember,
Uh,
but yeah, tell us more.
yeah. So I have been practicing the physical aspects of yoga, asana, for many decades. Before my background as a dancer, it was just one of the supplemental ways for us to move when we weren't in the
Mm,
studio with each other. And so I thought I was really good, air quotes, at yoga for many years. And it was just that, which it is for a lot of people. And there's nothing inherently
yeah,
wrong with that, right? We
sure.
find that in the Western culture, like that's what people know as yoga is just what happens on a mat for 60 minutes at a time in a studio. And it wasn't until after the loss of my brother, well, there was a couple of the sequential events that kind of cracked trauma in a way that happened. But the final real push was losing my little brother, and that's when the practice turned into something different. That's when it
Mm,
was more about um, the breath and the presence and giving myself space and time to sit quietly for
mm,
60 minutes instead of
mm,
and to be able to move my body and move. Sometimes it was just child's pose for 60 minutes, sometimes it was tears in the corner, right? But to have that moment for myself in order to go and show up fully, more presently for the people that needed it in that time, the other people that were left, or that surrounds that ripple out effect of
mhm.
of loss. And that was really the first time that I was like, oh, this is the yoga that everybody's been talking about.
Mm.
Then I
In
started to experience that and embody that in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so interesting. Like from my personal experience, same with like having experienced something so deeply painful, like losing a loved one. It really just took me so much deeper into my own spiritual practice. It created that space that I think that I was um not necessarily suppressing or it just brought me back to myself. And I think in so many ways, it's just like a way to connect with my mom after having lost her was that silence, creating that silence with them was kind of necessary. um yeah, so but thank you so much for sharing that. I know that the journey, like we said before, it's so different for everyone, but I know you've talked about several times about that shift into the spiritual, and I'm just curious, like what areas of the spiritual world or realm you were able to understand at a deeper level after having lost your brother and after having gone into the practice a little deeper the way you did after having lost them.
hmm Well, there's a couple of levels to this. So when people and I'm sure that some people that are listening will really resonate with this, and some people will maybe come back to this at a future point because we're all here with each other, kind of walking each other home. As Ramdas said, there will be a time when because if you it's the gift of being a human and of love. And if
Hmm.
you love, then there is a potential there for loss.
Hmm.
And so the first part of that was just being able to process some when it's acute, some of
Hmm.
the feelings, the darker emotions, the deeper places that you and your mind and your emotionality, you live in the city of senses, and all of these things that you may or may or not have felt before, suppressed or not, show up. They're real. And it's a floodgate that feels like it opens when it's very acute, right? And you're not really sure what to do with all of it. So the first step of that was, can I pay attention to my mind and the noise it creates instead of attaching to the emotion, right? Like it was a
Hmm.
crossroads. I had a spiritual choice to make. I could go into the dark with the emotion and
Hmm.
down a similar path to what had taken my brother in the first
Hmm.
place, right?
Hmm.
And have the experience take me with it. Or I could go the other way and notice that like where the crack was, there was an opportunity to let the light in and to be
Hmm.
able to sit with myself in a different way and sit with those emotions as painful as they can be.
Hmm.
And uh, in that dark space, in that quiet space, when you notice, when you can detach, and that is the beginning of, that's like the plot twist of meditation, right? Like the
Hmm.
mind's going to talk.
Hmm.
That's its
Hmm.
job, is to keep you safe and to talk to you. And so it's like, whose thought is that? And where did
Hmm.
it come from?
Hmm.
And do I have to fully play that out? Or am I really just looking for the breath between reaction and response in this
Hmm.
moment and the next moment and the next moment? And where can I detach from this deeper depressive place that I find myself in? That's where the alchemy can happen. That's where you can transmute a feeling, any anger, sadness, despair, grief, right? It's in that void where the alchemy can really take
Hmm.
place. And
Hmm.
so often in our culture, fear, even as
Hmm.
one, right?
Hmm.
Lack. So often we're taught, or subconsciously or consciously, by family, by society, to shove those things away or to
Sure.
compartmentalize those things or to suppress that kind of emotion and to show up in a different way, whether we're feeling that way or not, which really just gets it stuck in the body in
Yeah.
another way
Right.
for you to deal with later in the mind and the tissue and like something. There will be a time where that has to be dealt with and processed.
Sure.
And so all this thing, this energy void did for me, I can't thank it enough, really can't thank my brother enough to now be my muse in that way, is gave me a way to see emotion as energy in motion and know that it
Hmm.
it either gets stuck or you move it.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. I love this. I love that you're talking about the gift of grief. I actually wrote myself a little note on the board, and the top line was exactly that. It was like my little title. the gift of
Well,
grief.
of course it was.
Yes. That is exactly what I think we've both learned to see in that experience. And there's no right or wrong way to experience grief. We know this. But as we talked about several times before, there is a way of processing grief that can really take you down a dark path. And again, that's not wrong if that's like what that person needs to go through. Um, and for you, like hearing you talk about how you were able to sort of like step outside of yourself and observe what was happening consciously, what was happening within you. What a beautiful thing to be able to do in real time while being in that experience of pain and darkness. I don't know that I was able to necessarily do that for myself. I don't know that I had the tools back then, the knowledge, the understanding. Um, but I can say that what I did choose to do was, and for like, just real quick, shout out to Lear, my partner, because Lear had lost his father and had lost his sister. So when
Hmm.
I experienced my grief, I also had an incredible support system next to me. And I know that that's not something that a lot of people have. And so I was very gifted in that way. And because of his experience, he always reminded me to celebrate my mom. And so despite of the pain and despite of everything that I was feeling and experiencing during that very intense year for me, that like really intense grief period that lasted for at least a year. And then it of course continued, but that first year, I think I cried every single day. And so it was so, so intense. And so he'd always remind me, celebrate her. And that alone helped like shift my perspective into like I had the opportunity, reminded me like she had a life that she lived, and I had the opportunity to celebrate that life. And I reflected deeper on that, and it was like, how do I celebrate her? And I just embodied the best qualities of her. So I embody her joy, her like little quirks and things that I've carried with me since then. And it's just like I keep her alive by just being those best qualities of her. Not that I don't possess some of her darker sides because I certainly do, but it's just nice to be able to see it that way, or to know that you can do that. And it's not like anybody's out there teaching us how to do this. And again, there's no right or specific way to do it. But for me, that really helped me. And
Yeah.
I do want to say this because this is something that probably a lot of people do, and some of us do in some way. Some people may lean into suppressing it with drugs, alcohol, or whatever it may be. And I definitely observed it in my loved ones do that after they've lost. And so, but personally, I suppress with my work. And this is actually something, I don't know if you know this, but I was going to fashion school at the time when I lost my mom, right? Living
Hmm.
in New York. And I literally, within a few months of losing her, I decided I was going to start my first business. And I started a line of silk scarves dedicated to my mom. Did you not know
I didn't know
that?
that. I mean, I knew about I knew about fashion school. I knew where you were and the
Yeah.
timeline of it, but that is what a beautiful tribute.
Yeah.
But also a way for you to throw your that energy into like this displacement.
Yes. Yes, exactly. That's how I did it. And that was, and like I want to say, like it did keep me busy. And I think that that's what I needed to do. So that's where I do recognize I was probably suppressing. And not that I didn't sit with the pain. I sat with the pain. I let myself cry
Yeah.
deep, go really down whatever the dark hole of that emotion was. I let myself feel that. And I think that that's really important. And I do want to say something about that in a moment. But I did suppress by working a little bit more than I probably should
Hmm.
have. But,
Yeah.
like that's just what I needed to do. And it
Well,
just, yeah,
you have to have an outlet for
yeah,
it, right?
yeah.
Something has to. And I'm not saying that I was able to detach completely and fully. Right, I was a fucking mess. I was a hot mess, right? It was the whole thing was just abrupt and
Hmm.
tragic, and there was a lot of what do we do with all of this, right?
Hmm.
And similarly to you having Lear, and I think this is what kind of really shifted part of that yoga experience for me, and then became like, okay, I need to now do this in a different way so that I can share what I've learned and maybe, just maybe, pass it forward with one little pebble at a time to someone else in this experience. Big T or little t trauma is trauma. Like, what is it that I can give the rest of my community? Is that my yoga community was there as support in a certain way that was able to really just hold a container, just make
Yeah.
space for
Yeah.
all of that stuff in a non-judgmental way. And not everybody is fortunate enough to have a community or a partner to do that. So of course you numb out. Like, what?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
You
For
find
sure.
whatever it is to numb that kind of, that's acute pain, right? Um, and that is a part of the process. It's not overnight. Time, I know it's so cliche, but time is what kind of changes for me, is what made the grief and any emotion really that you
Hmm.
feel deeply, um, for more, less of an emotion, more of a portal. Where it's
Yeah.
like, can I hold grief in one hand and gratitude in the other
Yes.
simultaneously? That took
Yes.
time and practice. It was an
For sure.
active practice.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
It's exactly as I was saying about I got to celebrate her and
mhm,
celebrate her life and create
mhm,
this beautiful thing dedicated towards her while feeling the pain, feeling um, the darkness that grief takes you down, and also, yes, suppressing that a little bit, but still being with the emotions and being present with the emotions. And so that's really important if anyone that's listening has experienced grief or, as we were talking about before, at some point or another, we're all going to experience that, right? And so we will probably find a way to suppress that helps us cope with that. Yet, feeling the emotion can exist. You can feel the emotion, and you should allow yourself to feel the emotion, because as Pete said before, it's a reminder of the love that you have for this person. And there's no emotion that we cannot contain, because once we face it and we let ourselves fully see that through, like he was saying, there's a way in which we find our systems know how to alchemize it or how to transmute that emotion. So by transmuting, and I want to kind of just ask you about it, because what I'm understanding by transmuting is not like you transmute it, it does not mean you suppress it or ignore it. Transmuting means you feel it and let it evolve into what it wants to evolve into. And oftentimes, uh, it becomes like love, and or a reminder of love, specifically with grief, a reminder of the love and the joy and the death that that person brought to your life. So yeah, is that right? Is that what you're kind
yeah,
of
I don't
saying?
think that
Yeah.
it ever goes away. I think it just morphs into something different,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like it just
Yes.
changes shape. And it, like, the anniversary of my brother's death is Monday.
Mm.
And there will be things that trigger a memory, or
Yes.
because and he is just the energy. He's everywhere, everything all at once now. He's
Yes.
messing with my radio. He's, we're putting little pebbles and reminders in front of me all the time. But
Mm.
that they do, the energy of that is all around. And you're right, that's how you carry the love that you lost, then becomes the pieces of that person. You are them in living color. You're
Mhm.
carrying that memory forward. And I think that it's really important for us to note that I'm not just talking about, and this is what I've seen over a decade of coaching people, Ayurvedic clients, yoga instructors, teacher trainers, um, leading retreats with a breathwork facilitator where this stuff is brought to the
Mhm.
surface, transmuted and shoved out of
Yes.
cellular structures.
Yes.
That grief doesn't have to be the loss of a person. Like, grief and it takes lots of
Yes.
forms. It can be grieving the loss of a previous life that you no longer
Yeah.
live, or a community you're no longer part of, or
Yes.
a place and a feeling that was home that's no longer home. Like
Yes.
it takes so many shapes and form, and what we know about how humans deal with this kind of emotion is some of the best art in the world
Yeah. Yeah.
comes out of these spaces, right? There
Yes.
are like we talk about troubled artists, or people who are these creatives,
Hmm.
and it's because they have taken this emotion and put it on a canvas, or put it in a piece of music, or put it into
Yes.
silk scarves in honor of their mother, right?
Yes.
Or made it into a creative sequence that they can then share, or made it a circle in a container where everybody can be together. There are, that's what I mean by transmute. That's why I mean like
Yes.
finding, it's like that Japanese art of kintsugi, of reimagining that the vase is not broken. You can
Hmm.
seal the cracks with gold and it can be a completely new thing. Like
Yeah.
the cracks don't go away. They're now
Yeah.
just really purposeful and shiny,
Yeah.
right?
I
So
love that.
it's like a different, it's a reframe
Hmm.
of something
Hmm.
that you've been through. And I am also not saying that these places that you get to, these enheartened places where you can detach and you can meditate and you can be creative, have to come from a place of grief. If you haven't experienced that kind of grief yet,
Hmm.
it's not there for you. I'm
Hmm.
just of the small opinion that it's the fast track.
Yeah. Yeah. It is the fast track. Absolutely. Yeah. I agree with that. Um, and I do love that you're talking about grief in like there's different levels and ways in which we already are experiencing grief. And this is a conversation I've had several times with Leah. And not to go too deep into my story right now, but when we moved to the US after having left Puerto Rico, that was me grieving my culture, my roots. The moment my mom started working two, three jobs, and I no longer had her the way I used to back in Puerto Rico growing up, I started grieving my mom at a very young age. And I never realized that until actually probably 2 years ago, where I was like, holy shit, I didn't just lose my mom when I lost my mom physically. I actually lost her the moment we moved to the US back in like late 90s. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, realizing that it felt like a double loss almost because of not having her that way. And so this takes me into your brother's story and then my father's story. And if you're willing to talk about this, if not, like just
Mm-hmm.
of course let me know. But my father being an addict, I've been grieving my father since I was a child visiting in rehab. And so there are those ways in which we do grieve our loved ones that are not so acknowledged or common, but that pain is there the same way. And it just shows up differently or it's manifested differently, or we just uh, we at some point or another we find a way to either transmute the pain, or that pain can take us down a really dark path. And so, but it's all part of the process, and it's constantly happening. We just aren't that aware of it. So yeah.
Yeah. Pain can be power. you
Hmm.
know it is something that can be changed into that, but it needs to be, you have to be an active participant
Yeah.
in that for
Yeah.
it to happen, right? You're right. I mean, my little brother overdosed several times before the final time, and with each of, yes, he was very sick, and yes, he was a very absorbent, sensitive kiddo, right? And there were, I watched him grieve different versions of himself
Mm.
over his illness before we finally lost him in the physical, the way that he was. So it is a path that we're all kind of walking, because it doesn't have to be, it can be good grief. When people say
Hmm.
good grief, like you can be grieving the, you have left a relationship or a friendship or a job that no
Hmm.
longer felt the right, it had served you in a certain way, and
Hmm.
it was what it was, and now you know you're, and there's a grieving process because we feel this. This is how we feel the world around us. This is how we experience this city of emotions, this city of senses that we're in, is like those things were important. And in order to move on, we can't be stuck in the patterns of the sadness that go. So there's a grieving process, even when it's into another chapter that feels more aligned.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
the same energy of you losing a loved one, whether it's you're in the right order, family style or not. It's like this has happened and they're still here, but we're the ones that are left
Yeah.
with the opportunity and the responsibility so that we can change that for ourselves and for those around us, so that we
Hmm.
can then find what it is from that lesson that we are to share. Like this episode, I hope finds the right person in the right moment and the right time, because they're a little closer to day one, or maybe they're like, oh, I remember that. And now that can turn it into eventually, like, know that there's nothing we can say on day one that anyone can say on day one that's going to change that for you right away. And that's the point.
Hmm.
But for
Hmm.
you to use that to find that purpose, that poetry from your lifestyle, so to speak, that art that you're supposed to be creating,
Hmm.
to live more fully in that story, that next piece of this, because it's a game, it's a story. We're all in this and on
Yeah.
our own storylines. And that's what I mean by the fast track. It's like it zooms you there and you go, well, not, oh, I
Yep.
guess we're doing this now.
Yes.
We're not having a
Exactly.
choice. It is
Exactly.
forced by hand.
Yeah. Exactly. So I'm curious about your fast track. Like, can
Mm-hmm.
you tell us a little more about what that looked like for you, what that shift looked like for you? Because I'm curious. Like, there was like a way your life looked like before that, and then a way your life went down a different path after that.
Mm-hmm.
What was that for you?
Yeah. So it was, I was the problems that I had before the family tragedies. And not that I had never experienced loss. My parents got divorced when I was 10, and so there was a grief process there of
Mm,
not having the family model that other people were experiencing. I know that there are a lot of other ways that that could look worse, but that was just my experience. Um, Losing friends in high school, losing a sorority sister in college. There were times when I had touched loss, right? And then
yes.
indirectly, more indirectly, over and over again. Um, so I wasn't a stranger to that. It just hadn't been right in front of me in a median space. Then we lost my little brother, we lost Billy, and it changed into that acute phase, and it shoved me right onto the spiritual path. I would say, like, as a scientist, you have a biochemistry background, and everything in my life had always been very like, prove it to me, show it to me. I would have at one point, younger Param would have been like, I am very much an atheist because show it to me, right?
Mm.
And
Hmm.
yeah, prove it to me. Can you do it in the lab? Can you, like, did you write, who wrote this book? You know? Um, and after that, like I couldn't ignore, I no longer could ignore my own spirituality, what I wanted to explore around that. It opened up like the signs and the synchronicities that were very much always present.
Mm.
I was more of them. I went from nobody is right to, oh, everyone's right and calls it something different, but everyone's right, right?
Mhm.
Instead of none of this, it's all of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was a big shift, mindset shift for me. Huge. So that happened first. And then I was like, okay. So then I took my first 200 hour, and it was like the tip of the iceberg, because the more you dive into Eastern philosophy, the more you realize that everyone is right and it is very ancient. Oh, so then I just kept going because I got more and more curious, and the more you know, the less you know. when you crack
Mhm.
one of, when you crack the Bhagavad Gita or any of these books, it's just um, eye opening and
Mhm.
soul awakening. It's hard to read something like that and not have more questions than answers.
Yeah.
So and then from there, it just kind of snowballed. Then a few years later, my other brother had a pretty terrible, a pretty tragic accident, and he fell. He had a spinal cord injury, and he is now in a different body than he was at the time. And when you talk about a toolkit, when I sat in the ICU or in rehab for those 36 days, if I hadn't, thank goodness for the toolkit, because to get through care person, I know you know
Mhm.
that journey.
Mhm.
That's a whole nother conversation because care
Mhm.
people are always like having to be the strongest with not feeling anything. You want to talk about compartmentalization, be a care person.
It was hard. It was
And
so
there's
hard.
so many people in the world living with that, and nobody's talking about it, right?
Mhm.
They're caring for their elder parents. They're caring for, for people with dementia or Alzheimer's or stroke people or, and then just living the rest of their lives and going to work or doing the things as if that part of them doesn't need to grieve or can't coexist in certain spaces.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I just am grateful to Billy in that way for that first crack that allowed me the toolkit to be able
Mhm.
to sit in the hospital for 36 days with Evan. And then there's a grieving process with and for him because there's always a before and after. There's like before my brother fell and after my brother fell, like for him
Mhm.
and who
Yeah.
he is and who he was.
Mhm.
And he's still
Mhm.
here with us, thank goodness,
Mhm. Mhm.
but just in a different capacity.
Yeah. I love that you're talking about that level of like you grieve the person, you grieve not having them either in your life or not having them in your life the same way, and you grieve their pain and their experience. And that is like you're holding these two levels of pain or painful emotions at the same time and processing them. And yes, like for me, having been my mom's primary caretaker, that it was so heavy and I can't even go into it right now. I know I don't have the capacity to. So, but it just is. I don't think that it is talked about enough. So, thank you for saying that, for mentioning that, like that you didn't just grieve him and both your brothers and the different things that happened with both of them, but also grieving their pain that they went through while they went through that experience.
I think care people and people who are watching their own family members or community change in front of their eyes. We all came from
Mm-hmm.
someone or something, and some of us are lucky enough to have relationships with parents, whether they're whatever the relationship is, where they're
Mm-hmm.
aging, if they are still with you, which is
Mm-hmm.
gratitude for that, right? And it's all just how can we use this in a different way so that we don't just feel sad about it
Mm-hmm.
because it's part of the human experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
If this was not impermanent, it wouldn't be so miraculous.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't be able to enjoy or appreciate it in the same way. And the
Mm-hmm.
flip side of that coin is it comes with heartbreak.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And like you said before, heartbreak that doesn't necessarily, and yeah, it never goes away. It gets a little better. You learn to live your life with that pain, but the loss is the loss, and that is never going to, like, that person is never going to come back. And so you're always just, we're going to grieve them for as long as we're alive. Um, so that experience that you had with shifting into yoga and
Mm-hmm.
studying yoga at a deeper level and understanding the other side, the true yoga, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm curious if it was mainly what you studied through these books, like Bhagavad Gita. Is that
Yeah,
right?
Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Bhagavad
Or the
Gita.
sutras, or any of
So all
the
these,
main texts that you get in, like a 200 hour, the
yeah,
library when you first, or you Google, what do I study? What's the first,
yeah.
these bigger classical, yeah,
So
texts.
these books, like they hold all this wisdom, and you start diving deeper into them, and you start learning all these things. Like there's that eye-opening side, but I'm also curious if just the experience in itself made you more sensitive to the spiritual realm as a whole.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really can't not. And then being able to learn how to not just channel emotion and your energy into energy centers or energy locks, right? Like bandhas and the chakras and all of these things that you learn about when you're in a classroom in a school setting like that for this kind of practice. Um, but more than that, the breath
Mm,
and how connected your breath is
mm,
to your mind center, to your nervous system, to not constantly be in that adrenal fatigue, the cortisol pushes, the fight or flight that comes with, like, you're always just living right on the edge. And that drives into the hyperdrive or the hyperactivity of, if I run fast enough, if I'm
mm.
distracted enough, if I'm moving fast enough, then all of that stuff, well, I won't have to sit with all of that stuff. And your body goes, got you, boo. Let's just go. Well, I'll throw a little bit more adrenaline on it. You want a little bit more cortisol push for that? That's great,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
For a certain amount of time. And then you drive yourself into illness or, a hormonal imbalance
Sure.
or a mental state that is very off center.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
learning to come back to it, really, for me and for several people that I've seen at this point go through these kind of things, has been the breath as the bridge back to the body. And pranayama being this whole limb of yoga that can be very powerful when channeled correctly. You can
Hmm.
turn up energy, you can turn down energy, you can come back into the body, you can create more space in the body. There are actual roadmaps and names for these different kinds of breath work, right?
Hmm.
And when we got to, and it was in Ayurveda school too, and we spent a lot of time on wind and vayu and pranayama. And I was like, gosh, man,
Hmm.
this is medicine.
Yeah.
Your
Do you,
own breath is medicine.
yeah. Do you think that there is, and I'm just curious on your thoughts on this, because I've been coming across a lot of things that are talking about how we can use things like breath work or movement or things that are healthier
Mm,
to also like basically we're regulating pain and parts away without actually facing them. Like I do think that people can do that with it too, and I do think for
mm-hmm,
me it's like as I'm learning these things it is also so important to have this conversation because leaning towards breath work, prayer, somatics, whether it may be like with somatics, there's like multiple tools and breath work being one of them, but somatic movement or, humming, which is, I love. But
I
like
know you
these
do.
things, these things can be also a way, like, I guess I like what I'm trying to say is like, it's important to have clarity when we are leaning towards these tools to have clarity on where they're assisting us to transcend, but and where we're using them to suppress because they can be used to suppress hearts versus dealing with them. Like, and specifically, I say this with what you're saying right now because there's a lot of conversation on how breath work has become that for people, a way to suppress their parts, a way for them to not deal with with the shadow side that they need to be dealing with as well. So, like we know this is a healthier, better
Mm.
option, but at the same time, like I'm curious if you've ever thought about this and like where you see that fine line existing between like where we start suppressing versus when we're like when it's appropriate
Hmm.
to use
Hmm.
these tools.
I mean, yeah, bypassing is real, you know. I'd say that it is an important key. It's an important tool, but it, like anything, can become like you can torture yourself through a hot power yoga class in the middle of July and then go again the next day and the next day and the next day. You can love and light yourself all the way you want, right? Right. But you're not actually doing any, like rest is also a skill.
Hmm.
Doing less sometimes is doing more. And that's where I will say that there is a place for community to be held and to be that container, but not to lean too heavily on what without touching base with yourself first, what someone else's, me, you, anyone has suggested as your path or the way.
Hmm.
Run from that. It is a way, it is
Yes.
a path. It might not be your path. And that's when I get there with clients and they'll go, well, so now that I understand that, how do I know which me is talking? And I said, well, that's only something you can answer.
Yes.
That's sitting with both of those voices until you can tell the difference between the two. And that's the work.
Yeah.
Because part of you might say, let's go back to breath work again. And like that felt so good. I mean, that is a dopamine
Exactly.
driver. And that is like almost like an escapism response, right? That's not
Yeah.
actually helping you.
Exactly.
But I will say that on the other side of that, like when I don't want to go breathe, when I don't want to lay down with my breathwork facilitator, I'll go, ooh, I want to look at that. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
What is it that
Yeah.
you don't want to process? Maybe it's exactly time for breathwork, Param, because there's
Yeah.
something there that the other side of you goes, oh, I just don't think we're going to look at that right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you have to, there's a piece of this that you intuit as you move through and you can take, and sometimes there's so much advice and so much noise from the wellness community about this thing or that thing or
Hmm.
this thing or that
Hmm.
thing. But breathing is the way you come into this life and the last
Hmm.
thing you do when you come out of this life. And we know it's tied so deeply to your regulation. It doesn't have to be Wim Hof. It doesn't have to be
Sure.
breath of fire. It doesn't have to,
Yes.
there are, right, that might not be your journey or your medicine.
Yeah. Yeah. It should get you closer to yourself, not further away from yourself. And I do think, because I've experienced this type of breath before, specifically, there's a specific type of breath that is used in somatics. It's very fast and it's sort of like gets you kind of high on oxygen. But because you get kind of high, like I can see how this can become very addictive for people to sort of like feel so
Mm-hmm.
dopamine filled after these breathwork sessions for 30 minutes, an hour. This is how long people are doing them. For me, that's too much. But, and yes, we know that it can bring up a lot of things, and we do want it to bring up all these things. But for me, what I love about both the practice of sitting with my body in somatics and what I originally learned to do in yoga
Mm-hmm.
was that experience of sitting in my body, really actually being present with my body sensations.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that like there's like a difference between doing something to move further away from yourself to get that little high versus like grounding and coming back into your being, right? And so I think maybe that's like where that could be for people. It's, am I doing it to move further away from myself, or am I actually sitting with what's present and working through those emotions, those parts, those sensations, whatever that may be? I always like to have like a little journal as well next to me, whether I'm doing breath work or meditation or my somatics. But also like being with that experience and whatever wisdom that experience reveals to me at the moment, then like always being mindful of what I'm learning through it all versus just like suppressing it or pushing it down.
Yeah. It's this bridge to either the parasympathetic nervous system where you can rest, or if you are using breath work for sympathetic nervous system stimulation, that's the addiction of the fight or flight. And if you're already in that and you're sometimes lean into the body might know, want, and crave what it knows best, not what's best for it. Right? It's going to
Hmm.
go, it's the habitual patterns that it's already used to and the wheels that it already turns. It's like, oh, I love this breath work shit. This is like getting high without the, like, let's do that again. But is that
Exactly.
serving what you're trying to, maybe you are processing something through that. And
Sure.
this is the other thing I'll say about that is like, do it until there's no, it doesn't mean that it's wrong, right?
Exactly.
Use it. And at some point, you will realize, consciously or subconsciously, whether it is serving you or it's no longer, just like anything else, just like that
Yeah.
relationship you were grieving or the
Yeah.
community that you already stepped away from. There are
Yeah.
going to be practices that you go through. And
Yeah.
the healing journey, whatever that looks like for you, is going. That's why there's so many different places that you can go. There are so many paths. It is just a way. Maybe that
Hmm.
one will serve you for a little bit of time, and then you realize you're using your ego's
Absolutely.
using it instead of your body, and then that's no longer the medicine. And then there's
Exactly.
something else, and it's
Hmm.
okay. Like there's so many. We're so multifaceted. It's okay for you to choose another. It doesn't have to be the same thing all of the time, especially when you get really comfortable. That's
Yeah.
probably not it.
Yeah. Yeah. And fitness was that for me. And I know I've shared this story so many times and you know it, but yeah, fitness was definitely that for me after losing my mom. And, while she was sick, I would go for runs while being her primary caretaker. And that was like my only time for myself. And holy shit, if it wasn't for those runs, like they really got me through. And I'm so grateful for movement and for exercise for those reasons. It really lets you process, especially when there's like a lot of deeply held, painful emotions. Movement in itself, or intense breath work can be very necessary. And so I
Mm-hmm.
love that you're saying that, like, let yourself do it. But there's it's important to always come back and check on ourselves if it's, am I doing this to keep suppressing, or am I doing this because I really absolutely need to process this for my own safety, because I don't know
Mm-hmm.
how to be in my body right now, because I don't know how to feel safe and still in my body, and this is important for me
Yes.
to do right now.
Yes.
And that was for sure the case with me. Like if I didn't process that physically, all the emotions and everything I was feeling while taking care of my mom would have caused me to explode. Not that I didn't have moments where I didn't explode, like as I did, but it was it was a medium for me, and it was very helpful, and it certainly was an outlet as well after.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. If it's serving you, right? And there's always, it's everything in moderation. So like the body is at center. And when it's off center, it's going to crave more off center. And that's where we either go to injury or we go to illness. And so using even healing modalities when they're not in moderation can still push
Mhm.
off center. But again, no judging, because in that acute phase, we find a way through,
Mhm. Mhm.
because the only way out is through that stuff,
Yeah. Yeah, for
right?
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also found that being in nature, that changed for me. I'm curious what your experience was with that, but I wasn't much of a nature person before. It kind of,
Mm.
I think I appreciated it from far away, but I always thought myself to be more of a city girl. And I was living in New York when I lost my mom. So I was like, I love it here. And the moment she got sick, it changed for me. And the moment she passed away, I remember me and my friends would take these trips upstate New York, and just being surrounded by the trees just made me feel so much more close to her and connected
Mm.
with a higher power. And just, it sort of brought me, it brought hope. It brought hope. And, but yes, it just, I just was able to connect with her in a different way where I wasn't able to connect with nature before. And it was kind of a gift. So I think that there's those, are different, like we find different ways to connect with our loved ones too through these different things. And it could be art for some people. And for me, it was nature. And yeah, I'm curious what that was like for you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason you go outside and touch grass, you know. There's a connection to whatever source looks like for you through the things that have been here before you and will continue to be here after you, right? Whatever created anything on a cellular level
Hmm.
also created you.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so being surrounded by that kind of peaceful, I mean, that's why forest bathing is a thing in
Hmm.
Asia, right? That's why meditative nature walks are a thing. That's why just go and lay in the grass or go put
Hmm.
yourself in a body of water and have that blue mind if you have the opportunity to do that, or just go and touch the grass and pick up some of those free electrons so that you can change your cellular capacity in a way that you can then deal with. I mean, just take a fresh breath.
Yeah.
It's there is something so real about the not being in the city center all of the time
Hmm.
in order to connect to something that isn't run by humans all of the time.
Yeah.
A bigger connection, a bigger grid.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So if someone who is listening has never experienced loss before and perhaps is in this place of not quite feeling like they're living their life fully. And because we know what an experience like this can do to the soul and really shift you into living your life fully, what would you want this person to know?
I'd say it's really not that serious, guys. That it's we are in this, we are all part of this game. We are all here together in this moment in time. And if there's something that you have even a little itch for, a little ache, a little irritation, like that grain of sand that turns into the pearl, if something keeps poking you in a dream state and a journaling, if something's triggering you because someone else is doing it, that's information that's also something you could do. If not now, when? Because it's
Mhm.
beautiful, but it's delicate and it's not guaranteed. The fact that any of us are here at all is a miracle. We might as well take advantage of the fact that we're here. And I'd say just do the damn thing, because what's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're going to fail forward. You're going to
Mhm.
change your mind.
Mhm.
You're going to learn something about yourself. You're going to learn something new. Those all sound like good worst case scenarios.
Yeah.
And the more you step onto that loop, the more comfortable you'll be with it. You know, there was a year of my life that one of my best friends from undergrad and I tried to get a no out of everything. We asked questions. I was like, there's no way we're going to get a yes for that. The most outrageous questions, asked for favors in places from strangers, just like, because I was like, okay, what's the worst they're going to say? No.
Yeah.
And I probably 80% of the time, the answer was yes. Like we
Yeah.
create these blocks about the fear base of like, we can't possibly do that thing. But
Mhm.
it's a story you've told yourself. And it's just that. It's just like the language you speak to yourself creates your timeline and creates your story.
Mhm. Mhm.
What's the worst thing that's going to happen? It's a no.
Yeah. Yeah. Experiencing loss will definitely change the course of your life, but you
Mm-hmm.
do not have to experience loss to change the course of your life if you are needing to do that for yourself. Thank you,
Mm-hmm.
my love. I so appreciate
Thank
you. Thank you
you.
so much for being open to this conversation. Well,
Anytime anymore.
yeah, we'll do it again.
Yeah.